Good morning to you, our dear listeners and viewers. We are back here again for the Speak Out Show, today dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder as our topic. And I have with us a very beautiful gentleman from the UK, Mr. David Hyner. I hope I have said that right.
You have. Thank you.
That's amazing. He's going to be speaking to us concerning post-traumatic stress disorder, but but before we get into the topic, I would love him to introduce himself and tell us a little about himself.
Thank you, Abraham, and lovely to meet you all. My name is David Hyner, as Abraham introduced. I am a researcher and a professional speaker. Now, what that means is I have spent 25 years traveling around the world interviewing 258 really successful and effective men and women. So I have interviewed people in business, I've interviewed sports champions, scientists, inventors, engineers, authors, rock stars, and politicians, and trying to find out how they think and behave when they're being effective and successful. I've learned from these people how they set goals, how they use their memory, and how they manage what's called emotional well-being, including how to manage traumatic stress and anxiety. So I have now presented to over 1.2 million people all around the world as a professional speaker. And before that, I was a chef. That's why I look like Kung Fu Panda. So I'm here to help today in any way I can, Abraham, and I'm happy for you to ask questions or indeed field questions from the young people, or indeed I can just talk, whatever suits you best.
Let's get into the question. So post-traumatic stress disorder is more or less a new concept or term, especially in this part of the world here in Africa. It's something that hasn't really gotten out there for people to try and understand what is trauma, post-traumatic stress disorder, why are people acting like this and acting like that. In fact, we have given it all sorts of names. We Africans sometimes tend to be a superstitious lot and probably are calling it spirits, attacks, and quite a number of things. But from your perspective, an expert's opinion, what would you tell us post-traumatic stress disorder is?
Okay, so if we break it down into the individual words, a post-traumatic stress disorder. So post means it's as a result of something that happened before. So this could be anything as really small or really significant and big that has happened to a man or a woman or a child. And it could be as simple as they've experienced major horrific experiences in war zones or abuse, and any kind of mental, emotional, or physical abuse or challenge. And for example, what might cause one person to have post-traumatic stress may be nothing compared to another person, but their thing might mean nothing to that person. So it's all very individual. So it's not about it has to be this to cause post-traumatic stress. It can be anything at all down to the individual. So post means something that happened before is now causing a problem. So traumatic. Now, traumatic isn't, oh, I've banged my finger. Traumatic is when it has a massive mental, emotional, and physical impact on someone's well-being or ability to do day-to-day tasks. So someone who has experienced maybe violence may feel uncomfortable about leaving the house and walking the streets at night. Now, there may be some elements of post-traumatic stress within that. And because the event happened a while ago, but it's now having an impact on them mentally, emotionally, and physically if they're not leaving the house. So post-trauma stress. Now, stress, again, it's different for everybody, Abraham. So what causes me stress may not cause you stress. My problems may seem that big compared to your own, but vice versa. Maybe your problems seem that big compared to me. So we must never judge anybody else based upon what they say is causing them stress. And stress, again, can be mental stress, emotional stress, or physical stress. And a stress can be anything at all. It can be, it's too hot in here. The humidity, it's oppressive. That can cause stress. Relationships, physical stress. Maybe your clothes are too tight and they're hurting you, or somebody is arguing with you and it's causing you stress because you don't like confrontation. There are a million things that can cause stress, but when you've got something that happened in the past, post, it's causing you a trauma now, traumatic, and because of it, you're stressed, that causes the disorder of post-traumatic stress disorder. And that's when somebody is unable to behave normally because of something that happened in the past. That causes post-traumatic stress disorder. There you go.
Thank you for that. That was a really detailed explanation. But now, what misconceptions are there about post-traumatic disorder? Because here in Africa, we are calling it a lot of things. In fact, around the world, I believe, let me say around the world, we are calling mental health issues a lot of things now. For something like post-traumatic stress disorder, we have called it a lot of things, because in Africa, we have things whereby let's say parents, some parents don't listen to their children, and sometimes when the child is trying to pass over something and telling them, I have this issue, I have this issue, I have this issue, and then we listen to them, and then we see children who grow up and they're so disconnected from their parents, they probably don't want to see them, they probably don't want to be around them. So we have, okay, but with that, we have so many misconceptions on post-traumatic stress disorder. So what are some of these misconceptions and how can we counter them, especially in our communities and probably as people that might take this message out one day?
Well, that is a fantastic question, if I may say, Abraham, because you're right. The biggest misconception, as I've already suggested, is that people look at somebody else's problems and think they're nothing. Somebody should just pull themselves together and have a go. Whereas to them, that person, it's virtually impossible for them to get out the chair, get out of bed, or have a relationship with somebody else. So one of the biggest misconceptions is that it's this or it's that. It can be anything to anybody, and it can be caused by literally anything at all. So we must be very understanding. But if it's something that's happening right now, that might be stress. But post-traumatic is because of something that happened a while ago in the past. And I mean, I've lived and worked in a village in West Africa. So sadly, I do appreciate some of the challenges that happen in Africa, and they are massive compared to what happens to us here in England and the UK. You know, our problems genuinely are that big compared to your own. But you are wonderful people. And one of the things I admire most about the continent of Africa is the fantastic, imaginative and creative ways you find to overcome challenges. You are great thinkers, fantastic thinkers. So one of the first things I would say is to try and understand that most challenges are caused, most stress is caused by one of three things. And you must tell me, Abraham, if this is something that doesn't make sense, so I can explain it differently. But we desire more or fear a lack of control in situations. We desire more or fear a lack of acceptance or approval from other people, or we desire more or fear a lack of security. Now, let me explain. If a firefighter was running into a burning building, a firefighter does want more control because they're in a very unstable building. There's fire, they've got equipment with hose pipes and everywhere and people running around and there's chaos. So they want control. So that's big for them. Acceptance or approval. When you're in a burning building, you don't really care what other people think of you. So it's not about approval or acceptance, but security. They are really worried for their own and other people's personal safety. So a firefighter, their biggest causes of stress can be control and security, not necessarily a burning building. So we must understand that the problem is not always the problem. That's one of the biggest misconceptions. The problem isn't necessarily that there's been a war and people have seen horrific violence, or there's been challenging relationships between parents and children. The issue is that it's either about a desire for more, or a fear of control, acceptance, or security. So what we can do is, if when we're feeling stressed, anxious, or anything sad, anything that does not serve us, Abraham, all we can do is press pause on the situation. And instead of getting caught up in the problem, we say, what's going on here? Do I need more control? Do I need more approval? Or do I need more security, safety? Now, as soon as you identify which one or two of the three is going on for you, the next question you must ask yourself is, how can I get more control in this situation? How can I get more approval or acceptance? Or what have I got to do to feel more secure or safe? And then do something. Taking action, my friend, is the single biggest thing any of us can do. So most of us, when we're stressed, we close down and go within ourselves. We become quiet, withdrawn, and we don't face the problems. What we need to do is say, what's the problem? What's causing it? Is it control, security, acceptance? What can I do to get more of those three things? Do something. So it changed your mindset from, oh, this is a problem, to I can do this and it helps solve the problem. Does that make sense?
Yes, it totally does make sense. It totally does make sense. So from what I can gather, you are saying that different people have different issues causing them stress.
Yes.
That means that for one person, that thing could be minor, yet to that individual, it's a big issue to them. And that's the thing that's
Yeah.
causing them to feel stressed and uncomfortable, and probably anxious, and quite a number of other aspects. So now it brings me down to our next question, and I'm asking myself, okay, yes, we know people have post-traumatic stress disorder. We are seeing the causes. We are seeing could be a number of stressful issues, and probably how they deal with them. But how do we see? How do we diagnose? How do we understand that somebody is actually having PTSD? I believe that's the acronym that we are using these days.
Okay, so if I heard you correctly, you're asking me, how can we begin to see if somebody is suffering from PTSD?
Yes, yes.
Okay, that's a great question as well, Abraham. You're really good at this, mate. So one of the things to look out for is any behavior that is consistent but not normal. So if the person is normally really lively, quite extrovert, outgoing, the life and soul in a group of people, then all of a sudden comes quiet, withdrawn. They tend to look down and to the side. They stop wanting to go out. They'll, or the opposite, maybe they're normally quite quiet, but now all of a sudden they're disruptive, they're confrontational, their tonality changes into more aggressive tone. And anything that is consistently happening but is not normal for that person, it suggests that there might be something going on. And be they, you're looking at body language, if you're familiar with what I'm talking about. So when people are in a good place, there's an expression here in the UK that keep up, think positive, things are good. We tend to have our head up. And yet when we're feeling downright miserable, we tend to look down and to our right. And that's where these phrases come from observing people's body language. So if people are not behaving the way they normally do, that might suggest that there's a problem. Now, the other things are, if they're normally reasonably normal, but maybe they're fidgeting a lot, or they can't keep still, or have to keep leaving a room to get some air, these can all suggest that things may not be right. But what I would say, Abraham, is that unless they are a qualified medical professional, they shouldn't try and help those people with their problems. We should get them to a qualified doctor, counselor, or therapist. Because occasionally we as amateurs can do far more harm than good by trying to help that person. The single biggest thing we can do to help people is just listen. Sit and listen. Not necessarily try to solve their problems, just listen to them. Let them talk. And when they're finished, ask questions rather than give them solutions. And it's important that when someone is suffering with stress, that we don't try to tell them what we think is an answer to their stress that might be totally different to what we believe it to be. So we should, when they're finished talking to us, we should say, oh, that sounds terrible. How can we help? So listen to them and ask them questions rather than try to solve their problem, because we may not understand their problem. I hope that helps, Abraham.
Yes, it totally does. So the best solution is listening rather than giving a solution to the challenge. I believe, I believe that's what you are trying to tell us. But now, seeking professional help, let's come down to Africa. Let's come down to the African setting. And unfortunately, we don't have many mental health institutions available as they are out there. In Europe, probably the Western world. We do not have access to that many health institutions. And even if they are there, how many people can actually afford to pay for the services in these mental institutions? So what would you suggest that we do to try and actually help these people? Because sometimes we might not be able to get them into mental health institutions, or even on their own. They might not afford, they might not have access to them, because in Uganda, where we are now, where I am now, we have we have one mental institution with just a couple of branches. And even though it's present, it's not that effective because of its accessibility and its reach. It's mostly in the central part of the country, and the country has about 45 million people. In fact, recently, there was a study that says of us, the 45 million Ugandans, 14 million actually suffering with mental health issues in Uganda.
Wow. Wow.
So it's a really big portion of the population. But even with this huge size of the population, we don't have a mental health institution available to probably try and counter the issue. So now my question, to be more clear now, is how can we help? As we are not professionals, but we want to do something about this. So how can we help? Or if there's anybody out there that's going to come and listen to this and probably is looking for a way to help, how could they help these people suffering from PTSD?
Oh, again, fantastic question. Very insightful. So one thing I will, before I answer the question, one thing I will say based upon what you've just told me, Abraham, is that for PTSD, post-traumatic stress, to cause such a problem that someone needs to go into a mental institution, it would have to be really life-changing or life-threatening, that stress. Normally, post-traumatic stress can be dealt with some coaching, some counseling, and some therapy. Now, I also hear what you say in that there may not be many professionals in Uganda or indeed Africa with those skills. And for those that there are, most Africans may not be able to afford them. So one thing we could do is use the fantastic technology that we're using today. And if they are able to have access to a phone or a computer or laptop that has internet access, you can connect with these professionals in other parts of the world. Obviously, if they speak the same language, that would help massively. But there are professionals out there who, for example, they've just qualified and they need to work with so many people before they get their qualification. And so they are looking for people to help. And so you may be able to ask people if they would serve your country for nothing by asking them. Now, we have to respect people's time and their jobs, and not everybody will say yes. But there are enough good people. I'm already thinking actually of one person I know who specializes in traumatic stress support. And he has a network of people who are always looking for people to help. So after this call, Abraham, we should have another conversation. I might be able to help you. But I would suggest that the most important thing is people do. Do you remember earlier I said the most important thing is to do something? When we do nothing, we what's called procrastinate. We shut down through fear of doing the wrong thing. And so the most important thing is to keep doing things, keep making decisions, tiny little steps. And if you cannot get hold of a professional, one of the biggest things that people can do for themselves is follow the following question. Work with what is true. Now, when somebody's really stressed, we have a saying in the UK sometimes that when people get really stressed, they go deaf. They can't hear because they're so in their head with their anxious thoughts that they can't hear common sense and sanity. So what we need to do is encourage people to say, what you've just told me, is that totally true? When you say you can't go outside, is that true? Or is it just that you're not going outside? Would you be able to stand in the doorway? Would you be able to stand in the doorway with the door open? Would you be able to stand in the doorway with 1 foot outside and 1 foot inside? And keep doing tiny little things and work with what is true rather than just the assumption that I can't do that. I'm too stressed to do that. I can't get out of bed. I'm too afraid. Always ask the question, is that true? And if they say, yes, it's true, ask them to quantify it, qualify it by telling you what can you tell me that proves you can't do that? Have you ever, for example, if it's a fear of going outside, have you ever been outside? Have you ever been outside? And if they say, oh, yes, when I go outside, bad things happen. Have you ever been outside where good things happened? So what we try to do is we lead people with questions for them to find out what is true rather than just get caught up in the whirlwind of the problem. So number one is keep taking little actions. Number two is work with what is true and not what we call the assumption that everything is so bad we can't do anything. Always find out what's true. So number one, keep doing stuff. Number two, work with what's true. And number three is see if you can find online over the internet a therapist, a coach, or a counselor that could support you. Those were my three big tips for people.
Okay, that was very clear, and I have understood it, and I believe those that listen to this as well will be in position to understand this. Now, I know you have in bits touched the question I'm going to ask next, but I would like to ask it much more directly so people can get a sense of how to deal with post-traumatic stress disorder. Because, yeah, we have all these solutions laid out. We have all these things that people are saying people should do to deal with their stress. And maybe one of the ways we actually do it in Africa, people just say go to church. That's what we do. Because apparently every problem and challenge that we get here is associated with people not praying enough or something of that nature, or maybe some spirits. And like I said, Africans sometimes tend to be a superstitious lot of people. But the question now is, how do we treat? How do we deal? How do we treat? Yeah, from aside from helping the people, how do we treat? How do we treat the PTSD?
Okay, so without access to medical and healthcare support to properly treat PTSD, I sadly all I can do is reiterate what I've already said, which is the best way we can help people is just to listen to them and ask them questions. Try not to give them all the answers. Let them come up with things. So rather than say you could do this, say, would you be able to do this? Or what other ideas could you have as to how to help yourself go outside or deal with this relationship with your parent. And sometimes one of the best things to do to open that conversation, Abraham, if I was coaching you on overcoming stress, I would ask you, what is causing your stress? And then I would say, Abraham, if I was your best friend in the world, you would want to help me. So Abraham, tell me 3 things I could do that would help me overcome this problem. And so you're asking the person to come up with their own solutions as if they were helping their best friend. And all you do then is reply back to them. So out of these 3 things, which one is best for you to work on, Abraham? And when would be a good time to start? So the power of questions always is greater than trying to give solutions.
You had already said that, but it's now much more clear. I believe it will help it's going to help millions of people, because this being a digital age, this particular conversation that we are having now is going to be available for, I would say thousands, but I don't know, but very many years, and will be accessible to many. So as we conclude, I would like to ask this last and final question to you, an expert, to tell us, the listeners, what word would you leave for us? What would you want us to know? What tip, what something, a nugget that you could leave with us?
Okay, I thank you for asking that, because I have the privilege now of sharing something with you that changed my life when I was younger and has changed the lives of nearly 1 million young adults that I've worked with. Now, many of the stresses for young people are caused by a desire for approval from their friends, and they try to fit in with their friends, and their friends don't accept them. That causes stress and emotional stress. So the stress comes from people trying to be something they're not, or somebody who they are not, to fit in with other people. So what my advice to everybody is to accept the following truth in life, which is, for every 100 people we know, there are 5 people who will love you unconditionally. Anything you do, they will love you. They typically are your very best friends and some of your family. They will do anything for you. They think you're amazing. Everything about you is awesome. And they will never, ever disown you. Another truth is that in every 100, there are 5 people who will never like us. They're totally different to us. Every time we talk to them, it goes like that rather than like that. They don't like us. They don't like who we are, what we stand for, how we talk, how we sit, how we interact. They don't like anything. The truth is that they don't like anybody. They don't even like themselves very much. But as human beings, we try to hang around with this 5 because they love us and that makes us feel good. And we try to win these people over because we like to be liked. And we miss the 90 in the middle. And if we can let that 5 go, because the truth is that they're never going to like us anyway, so stop trying to win them over. The truth is that those 5 at the top will always love us, so stop seeking their approval. How about we serve the 90 in the middle, and then we get 95, because those people will always love us anyway. The truth is that we have to let go of the 5 people in every 100 who we will never, ever get anything but stress from. Sometimes we have to let people go.
Okay, thank you for that tip. It's a very amazing thing. I would say that letting go is the key, and somebody to avoid quite a number of issues and challenges, like you have said. And unfortunately, we are living in a world where many people are seeking approval, and especially with the youth today who are born into a digital era that has social media and so many things with likes and shares and all of that.
So true. So true.
I believe it has caused so many issues which are rippling, so many issues with so many ripple effects that are affecting people's mental health and so much more. Otherwise, that brings us to the end of our conversation today, which has been a very, very interesting and learning experience for me. I have learned quite a number of things about PTSD that I didn't know, though I had even made prior research to this conversation. But thank you very much for your time, and have a good day.
My pleasure, Abraham. And if I can ever help you again, don't hesitate to ask.
Okay, I'll contact you on your email for further conversation. Okay, thank you. Good day.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.